What is going on, everybody? Cam K here with you. Just give me 1 second. We'll get me on camera here. Ho, ho, ho. Happy Halloween. Mix the two together. Because officially, Halloween means we are only a couple months till Christmas. And the year is going by so incredibly fast. I want to welcome you all into the NASCAR Pinty Series Power Hour. We actually have news to start this episode. Andrew Ranger, who I like to call the king of the NASCAR Pinty Series, is back for 2023. Gary Calling, nice to see you, my friend. Remarkable that we get to have some breaking news so early in the off season. One thing that was really questionable the past couple of years was whether or not we were going to see Andrew Ranger in the future of the series. It was in a lot of question following the departure of Mopar, and which led to essentially his departure from DJK. He got this opportunity with WMI, and he will be back for the full season in 2023. Same program as he did have last year. So that is GM Paillet sponsorship. That officially is being run as a GM Paillet car. However, this is going to be a WMI operation once again. I would expect that you're going to see same team back together again. Joe Chisholm Jr. as a spotter. Caden Lapcevich more than likely back as the crew chief as well. Although I still think that if Mark and if Mark Dilley and TJ Renamato wanted to do something really cool, getting Caden Lapcevich in one of their cars for next year would definitely be one of those things. I think we can talk about really that, and I think it's one thing that is unfortunately not brought up enough is the real miss that the NASCAR Pinty Series has by not having a guy like Caden Lapcevich in a seat, especially as a former champion. We've got to see Alex LeBay, and I'm sure maybe he likes being in the crew chief role, but I think we'd love to see Caden back out there and competing against his brother. That would be really cool, I think, to be able to see that. And he's definitely one of the guys you could definitely look in and see. And I mean, how cool would it be to see a guy coming from crew chief role and then go back in and be a competitor once again. And I think Caden is somebody that could offer once again. So, Jim, I have reached out, and they did confirm essentially that it's the same program as it was last year. Their press release mentioned that there's no change here. This is still going to be a WMI car run out of the WMI shop, whereas the 96 will still be run out of the Cameron shop. I did inquire as to whether or not maybe we'll see a couple more cars, rental. Doesn't sound like that's going to be the case right now. I know that they're working. They definitely want to work towards that. You can definitely tell that, JC and Fanny and the entire team would work towards that. But as of right now, that's not the case. So it is, at least we're going to say that we're going to see him on the track. Yeah, sure, it's maybe not in the Paillet team physically, but still part of it in a way. Of course, knowing all about this, of course, I'm going to do my power hour and I've got to sneeze like someone's crazy. Jim, so if you use Chrome and you use Google, what's actually really nice is that it, thanks to a translation app, you can actually read. It auto translates the French article to English, but yep, it's back. It is not. We don't know anything more than just it being a 1-year deal. Right now, I would expect this is probably going to be year to year. I think that there's going to be a lot of changes that are going to be happening in the off season, and I don't think that those technical changes are something that maybe Paye wants to take on and also add another car on top of it. Now, the interesting thing here is what's going to happen with White Motorsports. From my understanding, last year they were at capacity in terms of the amount of cars that they had. They didn't have enough parts for the amount of cars that they had. And again, some of my understanding is that, they're looking for a lot of help. They've been putting out ads that they're looking for people. They want to hire more and more people. So it is going to be very interesting to see what Dave has on his up his sleeve right now, because really that is going to be a very interesting battle, because they're along with McCall, they are the ones that produce most of the cars in this series, and so hopefully parts are back to normal and shortages are getting taken care of, because hopefully we don't want anything to impact next year. From the sounds of it is that there are moves being made. I am aware of at least one of a team potentially going to do a couple more races than they would normally be scheduled to. There's been cars that have been for sale that have gone to new owners. And then, of course, there's the always interesting, is somebody going elsewhere? Right now, obviously, we know Andrew is back. We also know that more than likely you're going to see Cameron back. I don't see any reason that that's not going to stop. Certain things like you're not going to see confirmations for. I believe he would be one of those guys that we're probably pretty sure. But everything else is kind of open season. I mean, DJ Kennington, I think he's one of those. LP Dumoulin, we know that those are sponsorship deals that more than likely are okay until next year. Hopefully, at least they get re-upped for a couple more seasons. And I think especially with the reaction that DJ Kennington had to his paint scheme, which we'll get into in a little bit later, there is going to be a very open field of competitors for next season. I think there's a lot of names that hopefully we can see. Obviously, towards the end of the season, we got to see those names a little bit more, including Ray Morneau Jr. and Jake Sheridan, Kyle Steckley. I think all of those names, if we're going to try that, we're going to try to get some young talent, that they would be the guys I think that they have to try and get. If you're not going to be able to get Caden Lapswich in a car, you got to get those other guys, because I think that young fresh blood, local blood is especially what they're going to need. Now, I'm not suggesting that maybe they run the entire schedule, but at least the Ontario races for those Ontario drivers, that is going to be critical. Quebec, we don't have a problem with Quebec drivers right now. They show up all to every race as much as they can, and then at their home races, they're pretty well the best attendance as well. I think Delaware was our best turnout of the season, right up there with GP3R. So I think those would definitely be up there. We have to bring the Chastain deal up here as he gets to race, as he needs to be in a race next up north a year. Well, I don't know if Chastain's going to ever do that. He's obviously, the Cup Series is one thing. We know that is part of the plans. NASCAR is actively looking to bring NASCAR back up here. That is the truth. We're talking Down South Cup Series, Xfinity Series, not the Truck Series as far as I've heard. I believe that experiment they've kind of decided is done. But the Cup Series is the one that I've been hearing now that they're looking at pushing. Potentially GP3R, Mosport are obviously the top two places. I don't know, other than Montreal, where other circuit of those three they would go. I don't see a market out in Western Canada that's big enough to warrant that. I think you're looking Ontario, Quebec. Financially, I think Quebec is in the best position. GP3R, ultimately, whether they can fit the Cup Series in that schedule, that would be a little bit interesting. I don't expect that we would see Cup there, but if you saw a Xfinity Series at GP3R with maybe a Montreal NASCAR Cup Series deal. I mean, that would be interesting as well. It's going to be hard to say what they do. Ultimately, as we know, everything is reliant on funding. And when you have names down south that can't, like Kyle Busch, that can't get funding, that they need to stay in their same positions, it is exceptionally hard to get it for here as well. So, I think a visiting driver at a Pinty's race, Chastain would be one of those guys for sure. Toronto is an interesting one. However, you would have to kick IndyCar out, and I don't see that happening. IndyCar has been loyal. They've been here since 1986. I don't expect that is ever going to change. The other thing, too, is that the Pinty Series gets their own kind of highlight, being the Friday show. If the Cup Series were to come here, no chance that they're getting some sort of a highlight. It's too compact, I would think, to travel and to get them all up here into Toronto. Now, Toronto and Montreal, we're talking amenities too, right? And those are kind of your best case scenarios. I think that your options really are kind of and at the end of the day, I mean, I've been down there for the Toronto races before, and I'll be honest, I don't think it could handle a Cup crowd. It's hard to say that that's the situation that we're in, but it is. I mean, that is the reality. You can't fit a lot more really in the Toronto circuit. And again, if I'm being honest, I don't want to see the Cup Series come up to Toronto and run a street circuit until we know how those cars do on a street circuit, because they're not the Pinty's cars. Let's be honest. There's going to be a lot more weight distributed. They're not going to be as easy, not as fun, I would assume, to drive. The comparison will be to the V8 supercars, because the V8 supercars have the delicate front suspension, delicate suspension in general, delicate tires, and got that rough and tough body that won't be damaged as severely. But I look at the circuit and go, it has to be big enough, and I don't think Toronto is on NASCAR's list of big enough. It's in the right area, obviously central. That's a great area right in downtown Toronto. That's what gives it the advantage over Mosport. Mosport being an hour away and not really having anything around it would hurt it. Difference being, Toronto, you're not going to have camping. Mosport, you'd have camping. That's going to be a highlight. If you're going to get the Cup Series up here, get an attraction like that, that's what you're going to get. And to Jim's point about having Chastain come up as a visiting driver, the only place I see that happening is Oshweekon, and Chastain is not a dirt racer. So I think more or less you're looking next year, Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, Chase Briscoe, Alex Bowman. Those are the types of names that we're going to try, I would assume, and get. Glenn Stiers, I'm certain, is not happy that he wasn't able to get any of his stars from the dirt racing world to come up for the race. Obviously, Kenny Schrader was one name, but I know that there was a lot of other names. I would expect to see Kenny Wallace at some point. He's still heavily involved in dirt racing. At the end of the day, the series is trying to build its own stars. So we want to try and get those names back every year. I mean, we really don't know what the field is going to look like. As far as my belief is that there's going to be some names from last year that are not going to be back full time. There are names that weren't full time that will be this year. And I think there will be some movement between drivers and teams. It'll be very interesting to see who, at the end of the day, does move, who's back, who's not back. There are some names that I'm going to be very curious about, honestly. A name like Gary Clute, being part of the RGC Sports team really helped him get a full season out. But you just don't know. Larry Jackson, will Larry be back to a full-time effort? He wasn't able to do full-time last year, because of funding problems. And I think at the end of the day, we don't know what the schedule is going to look like, but I would expect it's going to be more of the same. It's going to be more out east, and I expect that we're going to see pretty well the exact same races out west. We already know that we're going back to Edmonton. Saskatoon, I wouldn't expect any changes there. And, your Toronto race, more than likely, unless there's a huge issue with funding, I don't see that changing. It's a really big highlight for the series on the Friday to be having a race. Jim says, you guys are good with promoting the Pinty series as Cup coming would only take away from weekly type racing. Doesn't build, at least that's what has happened here. Well, I think if you have the Cup Series, you have to pair the Pinty Series with it. Have to. If you want to give a huge shot to the Pinty Series, pairing it like we did with Xfinity in Montreal for so many years and the Truck Series at CTMP is the natural step. Now, obviously, if you're going out that to CTMP with Cup, or if you're going to Montreal with Cup, you have to stack the field. Like, that is an absolute must for these guys. It has to be 30 plus. And we haven't seen 30 plus in a while in this series. It has been a long while. I don't think we're going to get to the days of 37 cars. It seems like a really tough way to get there. I mean, that's getting guys running backup cars, pulling cars out of weeds, really. It isn't going to be a simple task. But as I've said before, I really believe that having a companion series would be beneficial to the Pinty series, so that guys that maybe can't do the full schedule, if they have cars that are interchangeable, similar to, say, the Ontario Sportsman Series, where you can run a Pinty's car, make a bit of changes to it, and then run it as an OSS car. You could run for 2 championships in a year. You could do more short track racing. I mean, I look at guys like TJ Renamato or Brian Cathcart, guys that maybe wouldn't run towards up towards the front of the field, and just get more experience, because I think we know that TJ's very limited in his experience. Brian obviously has been doing this for a long time. Brian knows what he's doing, but Brian runs towards the back of the Pinty series. Why not get an opportunity, run OSS race, make a couple changes to the car, and then all of a sudden maybe you're competing for wins, and then all of a sudden that's a lot more attractive. I think guys like you said, like I've talked about before, Matthew Scannell, I think even a Ray Morneau Jr. Would be somebody interesting to get into some OSS races. Just get more experience in those types of cars. Is companion events and ladder systems, obviously APC series. Reason I'm not choosing that is they're faster than these cars. They're late models, so they're completely different. I mean, every driver that we've talked to regarding comparisons between the two has stated that it is not close. They're more similar to super stock. So then again, you've got those guys that are from the super stocks to see how they would do. But I mean, we've seen the APC series guys come in and do exceptionally well. Shea Gemmel was the first guy that came in last year and blew people away with how good he was. And I think Shea, if that sponsorship situation had stayed the same, he would have been. I think next year, I mean, we were pushing at times to get to 30 cars this past year. We were 3 or 4 cars away. multiple times. That hasn't happened in this series in a long time. I think by having a fresh face like a JC Paillet, who's committed and wants to come into the sport, I think if JC can go out there and find people within his realm, people that he knows that are in either Ontario or across Canada that are GM dealers or are related in the GM field, people that he knows, and try and get them involved. I think that goes a long way. I think Pinty's, we've seen what Quick has done. So there needs to be that fresh new blood like JC is in team ownership. I mean, obviously you have DJ Kennington, you have Scott Steckley, Kevin Lacroix, you have guys that have done it for years and years and years. But the question remains is that if they were to wrap up their driving career, what would happen? And we know Scott has stuck around. Obviously, with his son's racing career taking off, maybe DJ is going to be the same with his son. Waiting. Obviously, we've got a lot longer to wait for Chase Kennington to come and be a part of the series, but I'm curious to see what they decide to do. Do you stick around and continue to build the series, or are you kind of done and you sell your stuff and move on to something else? I mean, we saw names do that. I mean, and we saw teams that stuck around for many years. A perfect example is Kerry Mix, and Mix stuck around and put cars on the racetrack to help this series out. And Kerry didn't stay away from the series for long. He's back. I believe he's doing hauler driving for the RGC Sports team, and was at a lot of races actually that we saw. So I do think that Jim's onto something, though. I think that Ohsweken race, it could be that first opportunity in many years to reach that 30-plus mark. The one thing that was very noticeable was a real lack of additional fielded cars. There very well could have been many more added, but we just didn't get, again, I think the shortages played a role, and the availability of cars too, right? There was a couple of guys that destroyed race cars earlier in the year. And the other thing too is that if you only own one car, you're not going to be able to give that up for a dirt race if you're planning on racing other events. So there's a lot of work that's going to go into it. It's like those guys in OSS did. I'd be very interested to see if an OSS team, like Brent Weller, for example. Brent Weller came up from the OSS series, ran 3 races last year, and would he be able to do something where he could just switch his car over to a dirt setup? It's not that simple. I think you're going to see that there's going to be a lot of rentals once again in 2023. We saw some pretty big names with Matthew Shirley, Sarah Thorne, being in those rental rides for DJ Kennington last year. So at the end of it, the field is looking stout. The interest level in this series is staying pretty firm. We're doing this show in the off season, trying to get as many people continuing to pay attention to the series and try and get some off season news and tips and talk about all different types of things. We're going to go to Terry Dewey back in the chat. I'm nice to see you, Terry. I know that things that at all these teams they're not slowing down. Like they've got a lot of stuff that they need to do this off season if they're going to continue and grow. And I think the team at NASCAR, this new NASCAR Canada team, spearheaded by Tony Spiteri, and I think he's got some amazing people behind the scenes that really I think will do amazing things. And it's a changing of the guard, so we really don't know what those first couple of races will be like, but we know that Tony wants the best for this series, and as we all do, right? And that's why we're going to continue with this show in the off season. The season's been over for quite a bit, and we're going to keep at it because the conversation doesn't need to stop. We need to keep it going because the one thing that's very interesting for companies looking into sponsoring a series, sponsoring a team, is social media presence. And you can't have an off season if you're a corporation. Doing whatever you can to promote all season long is extremely important. And guys like Alex Tagliani know how to do it. You can't just shut it down at the end of the season. You have got to go full bore. And if I'm thinking, I mean, Terry being in the chat here, I've got to think like a team like EHR is not happy when they didn't come through with a race win last year. They were close several times, but I would think that there's a lot that's going to be happening at that race team in this offseason. I mean, the fact they're selling race cars that were older makes me think they're looking in the market for some new race cars. And I would expect that there's going to be some new drivers. We know that 3 car looks like it's open. It had a couple different drivers last year. I don't know the status on the Stacys for next year. I mean, that's another one. And then the 8 car, we don't know if it's Lassard Cornamash back again. So there's obviously still some open seats there and some interest, obviously, because at the end of the day, that is one of the powerhouse teams. They've been in this series for such a long time. Not the longest, but they've been in it for a good amount of time. So I would expect, Jamie and Jason are definitely going to work. That whole organization, Ed, of course, is definitely going to spearhead as much as he can to get those cars back into victory lane. I'd love to see them bring in Jake Sheridan full-time based off of how he ran with this team last year. Of course, funding is definitely it. That's going to be the hard deal, really, is all about funding. But they did some really cool things last year at EHR that, I really liked their whole hauler redesign. I think it looked really good. They brought in some new sponsors last year, which was great as well. And that's what you want to see. You want to see those companies coming on board. Towards the end of the year, I'm not sure if we saw them all stay on the race cars, but I'm very curious to see what happens with them in 2023. As Terry says, revolving inventory and lots of behind the scenes work, which I can definitely expect. And that's the one thing I love about it is that these race teams, they go at it. These guys that want to get back there, and EHR really does have one of the top organizations, one of the biggest organizations in the series, if not the biggest. Obviously White Motorsports would take the cake right now in terms of car productions, but if it's an in-house thing, that's the team. Jim Haynes says they really need to keep GP3R event as Pinty's marquee event. With a fan base there, now Cup doesn't deserve to get handed a fantastic promoted and attended event. It's true, but if I'm looking at it going, if NASCAR wants it, NASCAR Down South wants it. Do I think that Dominic Fougere and his team would try to make it work? Absolutely. I agree with what you say though, because it is a representation of our series. It's about a market too, and based off of the crowd size that we saw there last year, and there was a huge crowd. I don't know if it's enough. I honestly don't know if it's enough room. One thing I can definitely say about the facility at GP3R is there's a lot of walking. It's not the easiest to get around. There's a couple of bridges, but there is still a lot of walking. I think it's an amazing facility. It is obviously on city streets. Hospitality-wise, amazing. I was blown away with the food that they had there. They had this place called Tsikok, and it was literally like a Swiss chalet meal for $10, and it was I've never had food so good before at a racetrack. Typically when cameraman Al and I are at the racetrack with Graydon and the Bunn family, we're there, and it's normally burgers or hot dogs or chips or pop. It's not normally something as exquisite as a literally a rotisserie chicken with fries, coleslaw, a drink, and sauce. It was remarkable for $10. So yeah, definitely the GAP3R has got the right idea. But if I'm looking at it, Jim, I think it's Montreal. Circuit Gilles Villeneuve is the place to go. I just, in terms of what spacing is involved, if it's Cup at least, if it's Xfinity, GP3R I think is what happens. They are, honestly, Terry. You know what was really great about it, Terry? I mean, Graydon and I are not French speakers. Graydon knows a little bit of French and was able to communicate. But you know what? Most of the Quebec fans at GP3R, they knew you were struggling to communicate, but they would always go in perfect English. They'd be like, "Oh, my English is not so good." I'm like, "But you're speaking perfect," you know. And even just saying bonjour, comment ça va, that went a long way because at least you're trying, right? And I came out of that trip wanting to learn as much French as I could. I mean, I can read pretty much French because of my work, but I just can't speak and communicate. And they were amazing. I really, if there's an event that you have to go to, it would be GP3. I cannot talk about it enough. We went and it was, I mean, for myself with my asthma, it was pretty bad. Heat wise, it was like 41 degrees Celsius. And again, you're walking on mostly concrete, so there was not a lot of shade. There was not a lot of coolness. And so that kind of made it brutal. But it's a lot closer that you can get to the racetrack than, say, a lot of other road courses. Much closer than Toronto. And if I'm going to look at building something around, GP3R is, like you had said already, though, you don't want to give Cup something, but at the same time, if you're going to go somewhere, you want to go to a place that's really well promoted, right? So I think Dominic and his team just are so good. Just amazing. Even the fact that you have the drivers meeting and they were walking through the fans to get to the drivers meeting and then get to the grid. And yeah, Terry, you're right. I mean, they interacted with the non-French speaking teams and drivers and fans. I mean, we had a little bit of trouble where we were located in Quebec. I mean, we were in a mostly non-English speaking area. So that kind of made it a little bit awkward, but the people come up and would just help, and it was awesome. I really was happy about that, and I think, again, if we're gonna go somewhere and build, this would be the place to go. But right now on the NASCAR Pinty Series community page, of course, you haven't joined on Facebook. We are 6.1 K strong. We have grown quite a lot this year. I think we started the season at 3,800 and we went up to 6.1 into the off season, which is absolutely fantastic. So we're going to take a look here at our paint scheme challenge. So our paint scheme challenge brackets. Now, I've had to cut this off because it wasn't the right template that I needed, but as you can see on the screen, we had a long list of drivers. Now, I did not add everybody. I could not get a good picture of Jamie Krizik, and it really wasn't a paint scheme per se. There really wasn't much, but so unfortunately that didn't work out. TJ Renamoto as well just ran a black car, just with a little bit of graphic for the logo. So unfortunately, I did not add him either. So there's a couple names that we didn't get in here, but it was a battle in the paint scheme challenge, which we threw up there. Basically, your favorite paint scheme, and we had fans vote. And what was amazing about this is that I wasn't expecting the interaction that we got. I'm just realizing that my camera was still very small. I was not expecting that. I really wasn't. I think at the end of it, you're in the off season, and so you're not expecting to have a lot of people pay attention and tune in. Well, we had a really good group of people come in, and we had drivers. I can't comment enough on how amazing some of the teams have been, the drivers have been. I mean, JF Dumoulin, LP Dumoulin, Ray Morneau, Donald Teague, GM Paillet, Aaron Turkey's. Wow, Aaron Turkey's crew. A lot of people supporting Aaron Turkey there. Chantal Kalika and Matt Shirley going back and forth, both sharing it. They were liking and commenting on posts. You had Matthew Kingsbury, Sarah Thorne from out in Eastbound Park also. So it was a really, really great battle this entire time that we had one. And I'm looking here, and I don't think this is fully complete. I think there might be one error in here because I'm not seeing the battle that I had between McFarlane, and I'm trying to remember who he was up against, but so Brandon McFarlane was also in this, and I'm not sure what happened there. Not sure who I ended up being up against, because I don't see it here. So we'll have to make sure that I fix that for round number 2. But we had Glenn Stiers and Brian Cathcart. Glenn Stiers got the most votes. Brent Weller and Brett Taylor. It was Brent Weller who moves on to round number 2. EHR number 8. And JP Bergeron. Bergeron takes out Lessard and Courtemanche. Daniel Bois and Tagliani. And I guess in a bit of an upset here, Daniel Bois took out Tagliani. Dexter and Wallace Stacy against Larry Jackson. They move up because their schemes are pretty similar. Trayton Lapsevich against his teammate Kyle Steckley. And it was Trayton Lapsevich that moved on. DJ Kennington took on Ken Schrader, and it was DJ Kennington that got the most votes. Gary Clute and Sam Fellows, it was Gary Clute that moved on. Donald Teague LP Montour and Ray Morneau actually had a huge amount of people vote for his 03 paint scheme, so really, really big turnout for that 03 car. Donald Teague and LP Dumoulin. It was Donald Teague taking down LP Dumoulin in that paint scheme challenge. And then the champ and Andrew Ranger in the Paillet cars against Alex Gannett. And it was Alex Gannett in the 39 that took the victory and eliminates the Paillet racing cars in round number 1. Lacroix's ESR car against his Napa colors. I don't think this one was really close at all. It was an absolute demolishing of the ESR car. The Napa colors easily make their way into round number 2. Alex LeBay and Jacques Villeneuve's 07 Prolon car against Mark Dilley's 64. And it was Mark Dilley moving on to round number 2. Aaron Turkey and JF Dumoulin moving in a battle. This was a very close one, an extremely close battle between those two, and in the end, Aaron Turkey had the biggest amount of fans to support and vote him in to the next round of the paint scheme challenge. He will be in round number 2. I'm just trying to see here before we continue if we got McFarlane or not. No, it doesn't look like he was added, so there'll be another one. Continuing on, Chantal Kalika and Matt Shirley. Now, this was the closest battle of the entire... okay, that's what it was. It was Dave Bailey. Okay, so it was McFarlane defeated Dave Bailey in round number 1. So continuing on, it was Chantel and Matthew Shirley, and then they went back and forth, back and forth. It was the closest battle, by only 8 votes. So it was close, but Matthew Shirley in the number 28 moves on to that next round. And then it was the Battle of Watson. Brandon Watson, his sheer metals, number 9, against the Tricor number 9. And Tricor took a pretty sizable win. It was close for a little bit, but Tricor came out in the end and took the race victory. Then it was our final matchup, Sarah Thorne and Matthew Kingsbury, and this one was a pretty easy decision. I mean, Matthew Kingsbury was my personal choice. And at the end of the day, Matthew Kingsbury will be the one to move on. So let's take a look at those paint schemes that did move on to the next round. Daniel Bois, number 31, will be in round number 2. JP Bergeron will be the driver that he will be competing against in this battle. So it'll be Bois versus Bergeron in round number 2. Wallace and Dexter Stacy, and they will be taking on... Hopefully these are all in order. I don't think they are, but we'll see. Nope. Glenn Stiers is going to be in round number 2. Glenn Stiers is going to take on Brent Weller in the 61. So that's the number 0. The number 20 is Trayton Lapsovich. He'll go up against the Stacys in round number 2. DJ Kennington, I think this will be one of the ones to beat. He'll go up against Gary Clute in round number 2. Of course, he'll have 2 schemes. He'll have this one and the purple scheme. He'll go up against this one of Gary Clute in the 59. Ray Morneau Jr., this might be one of the favorites in the 03, and he'll be going up against Donald Teague in the number 80. That's this car right here. Now, Teague was in a close battle for the win. Alex Gannett, and he will be, this is going to be a good battle here, because this is going to be Alex Gannett in the 39, and he'll go up against the 74 Napa Auto Parts Dodge of Kevin Lacroix. Simon Deonvien's 37 Castrol Dodge is going to be up as well, and he'll be facing the 64 Leland IHL Chevrolet of Mark Dilley. Aaron Turkey's Nitro 54 Variety 99 for Larry Jackson Racing is in round number 2. He's going to be taking on, I have it here as Brandon McFarland. It's actually going to be the 28 of Matt Shirley. The Provincial Vodka number 28 Dodge. The number 9 Tricor Chevrolet of Brandon Watson. And Matthew Kingsbury in the number 12 Duro King Bosclair Fee Dodge, also in round number 2. There's the Brent Weller 61. He'll be up against Glenn Stiers. And we're back to Daniel Bois. Now you'll notice that I've got an open spot here. So Brandon McFarland did beat Dave Bailey in the Paint Scheme Challenge. And Brandon McFarland will be in that next round. Now, what we're probably going to do is we're going to have a, quote, losers round. And that's basically going to be that there's going to be one spot for a car in a scheme that did not make it past the first round. Whoever gets the most votes is going to move into round number 2 to take on Brandon McFarland. Obviously, a little bit of error on my part. I mean, we could have added a couple of other schemes if we had had them. Unfortunately, there are a couple that we just didn't have a good picture of. Um, Likely, what's going to happen is I'm going to go through and either we're going to put everybody from that loser or the second, like first losing round up against it, and we're going to see whoever had the most votes. So Jake Sheridan was going to be an option, Terry, except that it was not much of a scheme. There is just basically a bottom stripe. So it was a little late. I had started the count before. But it's definitely something that we can have. Yes, Jim, please, if you can, if you're tuning in, I would really appreciate you with a subscribe to the channel. GeForce TV, of course, you'll get to watch content all season long, all off season long. And of course, if you could like this video, that would be great as well. We continue to try and put on this show week in and week out. I know the folks at GeForce Racing GeForce TV are really interested in continuing this project, and there'll be more content coming soon. I mean, we're expecting some stuff with Garrett Tiemersma and Lane Zardo coming on, but thank you, Jim. Yes, absolutely. We definitely want to add to the count, but as of right now, like I said, these are our next round competitors. In the Paint Scheme Challenge, I think there's a couple that stand out. And I mean, I personally like the 12 car of Matthew Kingsbury the most. But I think there's a couple other ones. Obviously, DJ Kennington's number 17. Got a lot of people interested when he popped out with that brand new look for 2022 after having kind of run the same type of scheduled paint scheme for years. Kind of just the black scheme with the colorful green on it. But that's that 12 car right there that I really did like. Got the Stacy's. I was asked about Dexter Stacy's 92 from Delaware. The reason why that car, the Every Child Matters car, is not in this same essential scheme as the 3 of Brett Taylor. When I do this again, we're not going to start it until after the season. I made the mistake of starting it the week prior to Delaware. I wasn't expecting a bunch of new paint schemes for Delaware, but I think Glenn Styers's will also be one that we'll probably see towards the next round. Again, it's all about getting the votes. And Ray Morrow Jr. is probably the guy that we had the most votes. He was up there, and Aaron Turkey was up there for the most votes in the first round. So it'll be very interesting to see where we go from here. I think that there's a couple that I look on here and go, I think those are easy eliminations in round 2. But then there's a couple of these lineups that I am not sure how they're going to go. When we look at Styres and Weller, I'd say that I'd probably lean towards Styres. JP Bergeron and Daniel Bois, I have no idea how that's going to go. Stacy's versus Lapsevich, I have no idea how that's going to go. Kennington and Clute, I would think that they're going to go more Kennington there. Morneau and Teague, I'm thinking more Morneau. Gannett and Lacroix, I'd think more Lacroix. Dilly and Dion, that's a tough one. I have no idea. Turkey and Shirley, that's going to be a fun one because they had some of the biggest voter turnouts. Watson and Kingsbury, I think that's also going to be a very, very fun contest. And then McFarland with, I guess, a driver that it's either going to be Brian Cathcart, Brett Taylor, Lassard Courtemanche, Tagliani, Jackson, Kyle Steckley, Ken Schrader, Sam Fellows, LP Montour, LP Dumoulin, GM Paillet cars, ESR, Kevin Lacroix, Serge Bordeaux, L'Abbé Villeneuve, JF Dumoulin, Chantal Kalika, Watson's Sheer car, Sarah Thorne or Dave Bailey. Now, obviously, we're going to have to look. I have to confirm that it was either Dave Bailey or if it was Brandon McFarland. I'm pretty sure it was McFarland that did move into the next round, but that was also another close battle. So, again, you can vote if you go to the NASCAR Pinty Series community Facebook page. That, of course, is where we'll be posting all of these pictures, posting all of our news in the off season. Hopefully, we'll get a bit more out there. Of course, there's going to be somebody that's going to be crowned the paint scheme champion for 2022. We don't know exactly what they're going to get, if they're going to get anything really, but I mean, we're looking into some things potentially, and I think that means a lot for a driver to be told, hey, you're the fans' favorite for this year. There's some people that I will say are not playing for the paint scheme. They're playing who their favorite driver is or who they're affiliated with. Don't do that. I know it's hard, but you got to go with what scheme you like the best. And when I say scheme, it means it's got to have some graphics to it. It can't just be one color all the way through, and there's got to be some stuff done to it. Like I said, I would have added the three of Sheridan. I just don't think it gets in there based off of if it was a scheme per se. At the end of the day, I think I'm more of the traditionalist. Like, I like just basic. You go back to an Earnhardt scheme, the Ernie Irvan Kodak scheme, like basic. Just, it doesn't have to be crazy. And unfortunately, a lot of paint schemes nowadays, they go a little bit crazy with the graphics, and at the end of the day, it's all about showcasing the business and making sure that the company that's put on that car is being represented and people can see what it is. And I mean, I'm curious what people think, actually. If you are I want a new paint scheme every year, or I'd like a touch-up of a paint scheme every year, or I would like to see a car completely redone. Or the exact same, actually. We'd say the exact same for the following season. I can't say that I'm all about that. I don't particularly like seeing the exact same scheme every single year. I'd like some change, whether it's manufacturer, whether it's a font change, whether it's the layout. After a while, things get kind of stale and they lose their oomph. Obviously, I'm a bit of a snob, I guess, that way in terms of paint schemes, because there are some extremely talented graphic artists out there, and I've seen what they can do with paint schemes. And if anybody's ever interested in trying to get somebody to do a paint scheme, I definitely do have a good amount of people that we can reach out to for you. There's also some great Canadian graphic artists, great Canadian companies that do wraps and designs. Out there, obviously, our partners at Stickers and Scuffs, Fast Signs is out there. You have, obviously, Image Wraps, which is a really big one in Ontario. Lots of great people that can do all sorts of amazing paint schemes. But that's, for me, what attracted me to racing, was always the way that the cars looked, seeing the Canadian companies in NASCAR, seeing the way, the first car that I ever laid my eyes on in the Cup Series was the Terry Labonte Tony the Tiger striped 5 car from 2002, and it was an absolute beauty. And I still hold it as one of the most beautiful paint schemes out there, especially for a kid. That's the one thing. I think that's why the M&M's cars always resonate with the kids. And I think if we can get a NASCAR Pinty Series car that is similar to that, whether it's, I don't know, something Canadian, like a Coffee Crisp car, which I've touted for a while, a Smarties car, something of a Canadian brand. Something like, it's like Lay's ketchup chips. Like if you're that's specifically Canadian, a Swiss Chalet car, something like that, where you're talking like a Canadian corporation that you tie to Canada. Obviously, Tim Hortons is up there as well. But we have hit our limit today on the show. We are past 8 o'clock. We'll be back next week. We'll talk more about the NASCAR Pinty Series. But, I mean, how happy are we to see the champ back, the king back, Andrew Ranger back in the Pie number 27 for 2023. I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in tonight and being a part of the show. It is always a blast to come out and talk the NASCAR Pinty Series all season long. Of course, you're always more than welcome to join us on the Stickers and Scuffs podcast channel. You can catch us on YouTube on all sorts of different, basically any podcast platform that you use. We interview guests all across Canada in their racing divisions. We've had names coming on the show from the NASCAR Pinty Series. We've had broadcasters. We've had media. We've had crew chiefs. We've had young stars. We've got veterans. It's been an absolute blast. And, of course, here in the NASCAR Pinty Series, we talk about the NASCAR Pinties every week that they run and, of course, into the offseason. Of course, keep it tuned here to G-Force TV tomorrow for, once again, our Race Rivals Race Chat with Clinton and Adam. And then more content coming soon. So I want to thank you guys. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you to everybody in the chat. I really appreciate it. Terry, Jim, Gary, Mr. Showbiz. Appreciate you all you guys tuning in tonight. Mike Russell's out there for a little bit as well. Of course, Big Al in the chat as well. I want to appreciate all of you guys tuning in.